Vanessa Brooks crossed the luxury handbag store's doors like a contained storm. Her stance was firm, her face framed by lines of determination life had etched there. She was in Manhattan, surrounded by dazzling shop windows and the gleam of high fashion. Every detail around her sparkled, reflecting the grandeur of her position as one of the most notable African-American businesswomen in finance. Dressed in an elegant black silk ensemble with discreet gold accents that highlighted her skin, Vanessa exuded success and authority. Yet it was her gaze that truly stood out. An unbreakable depth suggested that no situation would be too much for her to handle. Vanessa had overcome many battles, and her calm, intense stare left that unmistakable. Inside the store, the air was thick with the scent of leather and polished wood, while handbags gleamed on pedestals, displayed like precious jewels. The atmosphere was one of absolute exclusivity, almost like a sanctuary where only those deemed worthy were welcomed. Vanessa let herself be carried by the ambiance, walking with the ease of someone who had achieved everything she ever dreamed of. But as she approached one of the main showcases, she was intercepted by Sarah, a salesperson in her early 30s with a cold gaze and an air that tolerated no intrusions in her territory. Sarah was a pale-skinned woman with impeccably styled blonde hair and a calculating look. Immediately, her expression hardened at the sight of Vanessa. It was as if her mind worked overtime to process who this woman was, who dared to cross the invisible line she had drawn in her mind about who deserved attention. "Good afternoon. How may I help you?" Sarah's voice was soft but laden with a false cordiality, as if she asked only out of obligation. Vanessa, sensing the tension in the air, responded with a polite nod and a simple, "Thank you, I'm just browsing." Despite her calm reply, discomfort began to simmer within her. She was used to being recognized, and that dismissive tone was starting to seem all too familiar. Without moving, Sarah watched Vanessa's every gesture, her gaze frozen in place like she didn't want to miss a single movement. When Vanessa approached one of the most exclusive bags in the collection, a rare piece imported from Italy, displayed under a spotlight, Sarah bit her lip and stepped forward, as if to prevent an impending tragedy. "Oh, that piece. It's a very special edition. There are only 3 like it in America," she commented, not bothering to hide her tone of superiority. Vanessa nodded, examining the bag with her hand extended, without looking away. She didn't need to be told the price. One glance was enough for her to know it cost enough to be an extravagant luxury. Her mind was briefly taken back to a childhood memory, when her mother took her to the market and admired luxurious items on the shelves with the same fascination and distance as if they were stars out of reach. Vanessa lightly touched the bag's soft leather, letting her fingertips glide over its texture when Sarah's voice broke through, sharp as a snap. "Are you sure you want to look at this model? There are other options in the back, more accessible." The smile accompanying her words was a mix of contempt and sarcasm, but this time she made no attempt to hide what she thought. Sarah looked at Vanessa with an assessing gaze, unconsciously touching her own face, as if to say she knew who belonged in that environment and who didn't. She didn't need to say aloud what her attitude made clear. She believed that Vanessa, a black woman, shouldn't even touch such an expensive item, let alone buy it. Vanessa took a deep breath, feeling a bitter wave rise in her throat. She had been through so many moments of prejudice, heard so many veiled comments and looks of disdain, yet still felt wounded every time it happened. It was like a sharp knife that, rather than dulling, only deepened the cut. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mix of anger and pain she tried to contain with every fiber of her being. To Vanessa, this was another scene in a long story that seemed to have no end, one in which success wasn't enough to shield against superficial and cruel judgments. There she was, in a Manhattan store, with more than enough status and money to buy everything there, and still, she was being treated like an outsider. Seeing Vanessa's silence, Sarah took another step forward. "I understand that these collections can seem a bit out of reach for some, but we always have promotions in other sections of the store." she added in an even more pointed tone, ignoring the discomfort she was causing. She seemed to derive a perverse satisfaction from that moment, as if she were reaffirming a barrier she believed Vanessa could never cross. Vanessa stared at her, unblinking. In her mind, she struggled to remain calm and uphold the dignity she had earned over years of hard work. But her heart felt heavy as lead. The pain and disgust from Sarah's words were overwhelming, but she decided at that moment not to give her the satisfaction of a response. She took one last look at the bag, let her fingers glide over the soft leather one last time, then lifted her chin, gathering the strength to ignore the situation and keep her composure. When she finally turned to leave, Sarah watched her with the same disdainful smile. Vanessa walked out, feeling hurt and humiliated, but determined to keep her dignity intact. She didn't want that salesperson to see any sign of weakness, because she knew that was precisely the victory Sarah desired. The street was bustling and people rushed by, absorbed in their own worlds and concerns. With every step away from the store, the echo of Sarah's words seemed to reverberate in her mind, like a wound reopening. She felt fragile, like a young girl again, forced to face the prejudice that had followed her like a relentless shadow since childhood. At a crosswalk, observing the red lights of cars and the blinking traffic signals, Vanessa realized she was still holding her breath, as if trying to erase the scene she had just lived. But at the same time, something inside her began to stir in a different way. There was, within her, a strength that had grown from suffering, one she wouldn't allow to be subdued so easily. She looked around as if seeing New York City with new eyes and felt something rise in her chest. Maybe it was the pride her father had instilled in her, or the resilience her mother had shown in the darkest times. Whatever it was enough to calm her pain, transforming it into a barely contained energy. Vanessa knew that something needed to be done. Sarah's face, the condescending expression, the cutting and unnecessary words, all of it had hurt her deeply, but more than that, it had given her a fresh motivation. As she looked at the city lights, the humiliation turned into a desire for justice. She wouldn't let anyone make her feel small again, not when she had already conquered so much. She knew she had the power to make a difference, and at that moment, her mind began to formulate something bigger. The wound still hurt, but the strength it stirred was even more intense. While the city buzzed around her, Vanessa Brooks began to plan what would be her quietest yet deepest revenge. Vanessa slowly walked through New York's streets, her heart still heavy with the humiliation she had suffered moments earlier. The city's vibrant lights and the chaotic sounds of cars and footsteps seemed to blend with the confusion in her mind. Each illuminated window, each imposing building shining in the dark night, now felt oppressive, almost as if the city itself were judging her, questioning whether she really belonged to this world of luxury and power. She felt her chest tighten, her throat dry, and for a moment she needed to stop, trying to control the emotion that threatened to overflow. This wasn't the first time Vanessa had experienced others' contempt, the superficial and scornful judgment that sought to erase her, reduce her. To most, she was just another face, another figure in the crowd. Even with the success, respect, and fortune she had accumulated over the years, it still seemed impossible to break the invisible barriers so many insisted on raising. A solitary tear rolled down her cheek, warm and alone, carrying with it an old, deep weight that came from a time when her life was marked by hardships and challenges she had always faced with her head held high. As she walked, the faces around her transformed into ghosts of the past. Images of her childhood emerged in her mind, clear and vivid as if she were back in her old neighborhood. She could see the narrow, neglected streets where she grew up, the gray, worn-out buildings that witnessed the daily struggles of families living there, each fighting tooth and nail to survive. The poor, segregated neighborhood where she was raised was a reflection of the difficulties she had faced since she was little, surrounded by distrustful glances and harsh words that quickly destabilized even the strongest. Vanessa remembered the small, simple apartment where her mother, a hard-working and tireless woman, struggled to keep her and her siblings fed and safe. Her mother, always so resilient, faced each day with an exhausted but determined gaze. No matter how hard the circumstances, she refused to give up. Many times, Vanessa had seen her come home late at night, shoulders drooping with fatigue, her gaze distant, yet still finding the strength to smile and tell stories to the kids before they slept. It was a weary smile, yes, but also a symbol of hope, a reminder that they could achieve something greater if they didn't give up. Those memories washed over her like a cold wind, making her shiver. She remembered her mother's encouraging words, who, even amid exhaustion and tears, always told Vanessa that the world could be harsh, but nothing could take away her dignity and inner strength. "Never let anyone make you feel small, Vanessa," she would say, holding her daughter's hands firmly. "You're as big as your dreams, and those dreams are yours. No one can take that from you." And Vanessa, as if those words were a prayer, kept each syllable close to her heart. But life in the neighborhood was hard. Vanessa had learned early that to many she was just another black girl, in a world where doors seemed permanently closed for people like her. At 12, she remembered walking with books clutched to her chest, trying to ignore the curious looks and muffled laughs of those who didn't believe she could go beyond what statistics predicted. She was a constant target of derogatory comments, even from teachers who often didn't hide their disdain when they said that if she was lucky, maybe she could get an ordinary job to help her mother. Those words were spoken in a tone of realism, but Vanessa understood what they really meant, that in their view, her place wasn't in high circles, in luxurious offices in Manhattan, or even in those shiny stores she now frequented. These memories were like invisible cuts that still bled within her soul. She remembered her father's face, who had left when she was still very young. He had left a silent mark on her life, a painful absence that often filled her heart with unanswered questions. It was her mother who always offered comfort, replacing the lack of a father with words of courage and inspiring stories of other women who, like her, had managed to change their destinies. Every night, Vanessa clung to these stories as if they were her anchor, proof that even in such an unequal world, there was still a chance for change. Her first decision to fight for something greater came in high school. Vanessa had always had an aptitude for numbers, something her teachers couldn't ignore, though some tried to discourage her. She began studying tirelessly, determined to find a way to change the reality around her. Mathematics and logic became her allies, almost like a secret language that revealed a world of possibilities. It was then, with a scholarship, that she managed to get into one of the country's most renowned universities, a victory she still remembered with a mix of pride and relief. Looking back, Vanessa saw that every racial and economic barrier she had faced had been overcome with sweat and tears. She had built her own fortress of achievements, and today, in that city of skyscrapers, she was more than a successful businesswoman. She was a survivor, a dream conqueror many deemed unreachable. Reflecting on all this, her heart filled with a new determination. She knew that from that moment on, she wouldn't allow anyone to underestimate her. Not anymore. As tears threatened to fall, Vanessa raised her chin, feeling the weight of each challenge she had faced like an invisible medal, the living proof of her own courage. She knew that the humiliation she had endured that afternoon wasn't just an attack on her, but on everything she represented. It was the memory of a cruel past she had fought to leave behind, but that now returned in new faces and other places. And perhaps, she thought, it was time to confront those ghosts with more than just words. It was time to take control and show the world that she was where she was, not by chance, but by merit, strength, and a determination few could understand. A powerful energy began to grow within her, like a flame refusing to go out. Vanessa felt that she needed to transform that pain into something more, an affirmation of who she was. A woman who had endured prejudice, who had faced an unjust system, and who had nonetheless built an empire. No, she wouldn't let anyone bring her down. She had come too far to yield to others' contempt, and with that, an idea began to form in her mind, an intense desire to reclaim what was hers, to turn that experience into something bigger, something that could open doors rather than close them. The memory of her childhood challenges and the weight of each achievement solidified in Vanessa an unwavering purpose. Walking the busy streets of Manhattan, she realized clearly that she needed to turn the humiliation she had suffered into something greater, a pursuit of justice, perhaps redemption. She wasn't driven by pure vengeance, but by a desire to see reflected in the world the respect so many had denied her journey. She needed to show that each battle won, each silent tear, and each sleepless night meant something. And for that, she would have to face prejudice head-on, strategically and relentlessly. Arriving at her office, Vanessa sat in her soft leather chair, still weighed down by that afternoon, and the memories flooding her mind. Her expression was firm and controlled, but there was a glint of determination in her eyes. With a light touch, she picked up the phone and made the call she knew was essential for the first step of her new mission. Soon, her attorney, Daniel Moreno, a trusted longtime partner, answered with his usual efficiency. Daniel knew Vanessa's story well. He had been by her side since the start of her business journey and shared the same desire for justice that she carried in her heart. "Daniel, I need an investigation on a luxury handbag store on Madison Avenue. I need to know who owns it, its current financial status, anything that might give me an advantage," she said, her voice firm and incisive as her fingers lightly tapped on the mahogany desk. Daniel, with his professional tone, assured her she would have the information quickly. It wasn't common for Vanessa to request such personal investigations, but the tone of her voice conveyed a seriousness he wouldn't question. Within hours, Daniel returned with what Vanessa needed. The news brought her silent satisfaction. The store's owner was facing serious financial difficulties due to poorly calculated investments and exorbitant expenses that had drained the business's reserves. The store, once a gem on Madison Avenue, was now discreetly for sale, waiting for a buyer who could take on its debts and possibly revitalize it. It was a rare opportunity, and Vanessa saw in it the perfect chance not only to right the humiliation she had suffered, but also to transform the space into something new, fair, and meaningful. Vanessa asked Daniel to start the negotiations without revealing her name. She wanted to keep every detail of her identity in complete secrecy. Above all, she wanted the transaction to be swift and invisible to the store's employees, especially to Sarah. She knew that for the impact to be real, the element of surprise had to be preserved until the last second. Every move was calculated. Vanessa was aware that discretion was her greatest ally in this initial phase. Her attorney, accustomed to handling complex negotiations, conducted the transaction with the skill and precision expected of someone in his position. In a few days, all documents were ready, and the purchase was secured. Vanessa was officially the new owner of the store, but only she and Daniel knew it. During this process, Vanessa began to meticulously plan what she would do with Sarah. It wasn't just about personal retaliation. For Vanessa, it was a matter of correcting deeply ingrained behavior and delivering a lesson that would serve as an example. She knew that Sarah needed to feel the impact of her own prejudice, and not just with a superficial reprimand. There was something much bigger at stake, a change of consciousness that Vanessa wanted to instill in that space, and perhaps inspire in other companies as well. She felt compelled to create an environment where anyone who walked through those doors felt respect and equality without having to prove their worth every second. While organizing every detail of the new management, Vanessa dedicated herself to discreetly observing the store's operation. She visited the location frequently, but always in disguise, accompanied by Daniel, who ensured they weren't recognized. With each visit, Vanessa noticed how Sarah and some other employees maintained an attitude of superiority and contempt towards certain clients. Some were ignored while others were judged by their appearance or behavior. The sense of elitism that the store carried made the atmosphere oppressive, far from what Vanessa envisioned for her new venture. As days passed, Vanessa felt her initial anger transform into a deeper sense of purpose. She would make that store a symbol of inclusion, where clients and employees felt valued regardless of appearance or background. More than an action against Sarah, the purchase of the store would become an act of redefinition for Vanessa and for all those who had once faced the same type of discrimination she had on that fateful afternoon. Finally, Vanessa prepared herself for the big reveal. In secret, she arranged a meeting with the entire store team. She used the administrative team to communicate the meeting, informing them only that it would be something important regarding the future of the business. However, her name was still not mentioned. She knew the impact of the moment depended on the surprise and shock her presentation as the new owner would cause. Everything was ready, and Vanessa felt her heart beat faster with each second closer to that meeting. She had waited patiently, every detail planned to perfection, and now it was time to claim what was hers and instill the transformation she so desired. Vanessa entered the store before the meeting, her presence silent but powerful. The calm expression and determined eyes contrasted with the internal turmoil she was experiencing. She looked around and envisioned all the changes she would make, from the product layout to the employees' behavior. She felt a mixture of anticipation and satisfaction as she realized that control was finally in her hands. Just before the meeting began, Vanessa and Daniel exchanged a final look of complicity. He wished her luck, and she nodded, confident but aware that the moment would be delicate. She watched as employees entered the room one by one, including Sarah, who displayed the same arrogant stance Vanessa remembered well. Sarah threw sharp looks around, seemingly annoyed at having to interrupt her workday for something she believed to be a formality. The atmosphere in the room was tense and full of expectation. Everyone murmured quietly among themselves, trying to guess the nature of this unexpected meeting. When Vanessa stepped in front of the team, conversation ceased, and there was absolute silence. The moment of shock that followed was exactly what she had anticipated. Sarah paled, unable to hide her surprise and discomfort upon recognizing Vanessa. It was a complete role reversal, a blow of reality Sarah would never have expected to experience. And for Vanessa, the realization of that moment was more profound than a simple personal victory. It was proof that no one could define her worth, that she would always be stronger than others' judgments. The meeting room was silent, the air heavy with anticipation and a hint of anxiety. The store employees sat around the large glass table, some visibly intrigued and others simply impatient, exchanging glances and whispers of curiosity about the purpose of this gathering. The meeting had been called suddenly, without many details, and many were still trying to guess the reason. Sarah, seated near the head of the table, kept her usual arrogant expression, with a slight sneer that made it clear she considered the event an unnecessary formality. She seemed convinced that, whatever the news, her place was assured. Vanessa entered the room accompanied by Daniel, but her presence almost went unnoticed at first. The room fell into absolute silence as she approached the head of the table, standing with a serene yet visibly powerful posture. When Sarah looked up and saw who was standing there, she froze, her body stiffening in an expression of surprise and discomfort. Her smile disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a look of astonishment. Vanessa's presence, the woman she had scorned and humiliated in the store days before, now seemed like a cruel twist of fate. "Good morning, everyone," Vanessa began, with a firm and controlled tone, while her eyes roamed the room. The atmosphere was tense, and the silence grew almost tangible. Each word she spoke carried an authority the audience didn't fully understand yet, but instinctively respected. However, Sarah remained motionless, her gaze fixed, unable to hide her discomfort. "Today, you're gathered here to meet the new owner of this store," Vanessa continued, maintaining a calm but firm tone. Each word seemed to echo as an undeniable declaration of power. The seconds of silence following the announcement felt like an eternity. All eyes turned toward her, and a whispering murmur swept through the room. Vanessa observed each expression carefully, each look, knowing that this moment was the confirmation that her plan was exactly where she wanted it to be. But her focus was primarily on Sarah. The salesperson appeared frozen, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open in a blend of shock and disbelief. The sensation of standing before the new owner was, for her, a devastating blow, an irony she could only process gradually. Vanessa held her gaze firmly on Sarah, allowing the impact of her presence to settle completely. It was as if the roles had reversed, and now Sarah, who had judged and underestimated Vanessa, faced the inescapable truth that the person she had humiliated was, in reality, the one deciding her future. After a few moments, Vanessa resumed speaking, addressing everyone but glancing briefly at Sarah as a silent reminder. As the new owner, I have important plans to transform this place. I want to create an environment that reflects respect, dignity, and equality. I won't tolerate discrimination or prejudice. Every customer who enters this store should feel valued, regardless of who they are. Her words, though firm and professional, carried an intensity that directly reached Sarah, a sort of veiled judgment. Sarah lowered her eyes, her face visibly troubled, trying to hide the shame and regret beginning to surface within her. The meeting was brief, but impactful. Vanessa didn't prolong it, merely informing the team that she would be assessing everyone's work in the coming weeks, watching for the values and attitudes each employee displayed. At the end, however, she made a point of thanking everyone for being there, each word chosen with precision to reinforce the new environment she intended to establish. As the meeting ended and the employees began leaving the room, Vanessa stood back, watching discreetly as Sarah rose, hesitant and visibly uncomfortable, doing everything possible to avoid meeting Vanessa's gaze. But Vanessa wouldn't let the moment slip away. When she saw Sarah at the door, she called her in a tone that, though serene, left no room for refusal. "Sarah, could you come with me, please?" Her words carried an authority that made it clear this was not a request, but an instruction. Sarah turned slowly, her face tense, unable to hide the discomfort she felt facing Vanessa. The walk to the office felt endless, and with each step, Sarah's heart beat faster, as if something much bigger was about to happen. Inside the office, Vanessa made a point of keeping the environment calm and controlled. She gently closed the door, indicating that Sarah should sit down. Every detail of that moment was planned, and Vanessa was ready to confront the employee who had so deeply disrespected her. Sitting down, Sarah avoided looking at Vanessa, trying to keep a defensive posture, yet visibly nervous. "Sarah," Vanessa began, her tone controlled and her expression measured, as if she had weighed every word carefully. "I would like to understand why you treated a customer with such contempt days ago." The question was thrown like a stone into a calm lake, disturbing the serenity Sarah was trying to maintain. She remained silent for a moment, her face pale and her gaze distant, as if trying to find an explanation that didn't sound absurd. But the truth was that no excuse seemed good enough. It wasn't my intention. Sarah stammered, visibly unsettled. She tried to come up with an explanation, but Vanessa's imposing presence intimidated her uncontrollably. She knew that any justification would sound hollow, that any word would only reflect her own prejudice. Vanessa, however, remained calm, allowing Sarah to face the weight of her silence. "It wasn't your intention," Vanessa repeated with a slight irony in her voice. "You judged someone solely by appearance, without even imagining who was before you. That kind of attitude is unacceptable, regardless of the context or person involved." Vanessa leaned forward slightly, keeping her eyes fixed on Sarah, who now felt increasingly cornered. She felt exposed, as if each of her errors was being pointed out with surgical precision. Sarah, with no way to escape, began to realize the depth of the mistake she had made. The image of Vanessa, sitting there as her new boss, not just any customer, but the person who now held power over her career, was a blow she would never have imagined. Within her, a whirlwind of emotions mixed: regret, shame, and above all, the bitter realization that she was a victim of her own prejudice. Vanessa took a deep breath, staying calm. "I want you to understand, Sarah, that this store represents something much bigger than just luxury sales, and I won't tolerate any attitude that dishonors the environment I want to build." Vanessa's tone was firm and decisive. Sarah had no words, knowing that deep down, nothing she could say would save her. She realized that she had lost more than just a job. She had lost the trust and respect Vanessa intended to establish there. Vanessa looked at Sarah for what seemed like an eternity, each second heavy with expectation and tension. The atmosphere in the office was almost unbearable, and Sarah, with her head lowered and her hands trembling, seemed incapable of facing the force before her. Vanessa remained calm, but her expression was firm and resolute. She had gotten there through merit, and she was ready to show that her patience and generosity would not be mistaken for weakness. "Sarah," Vanessa began with a voice that overflowed with authority and serenity, "after everything I've seen, I believe your presence here is incompatible with the values I intend to establish." Vanessa observed the impact of her words on Sarah, whose expression now was one of pure shock and dread. "Understand that this is not a space for prejudice, judgments, disrespect, or attitudes that exclude, and you failed to represent those values." Sarah, in a last and desperate effort, tried to explain, murmuring disconnected words, attempting to appeal to Vanessa's sense. "Please, Vanessa, I'm sorry. Maybe I misinterpreted. I really need this job." But Vanessa didn't break eye contact, didn't allow the strength of her decision to waver. Calmly, she said, "Hand in your badge and personal belongings. I'm asking you to leave immediately." With every word, Sarah's face contorted, her expression alternating between disbelief and humiliation. It was as if only now she understood the depth of her mistake, the true gravity of her prejudice, and the futility of any justification she might offer. At that moment, there was nowhere to run. Sarah felt the weight of her own arrogance, her superiority shattered before the painful truth that she had underestimated someone far greater than any position or appearance. The walk to the exit seemed like an endless journey, where every step revealed her own regret, a bitterness she would carry for a long time. The silence in the office was overwhelming, and Vanessa watched her with a look that, although stern, contained unshakable dignity. Sarah left the store with her head down, realizing her prejudice had dug the hole she now found herself in. With Sarah's departure, Vanessa felt the weight of her decision and a sense of justice resonating in her chest. While she knew that that specific action wouldn't correct all the world's injustices, she understood that each step contributed to creating an environment where people were valued for who they truly were, not for what they appeared to be. Now, it was time to begin again, to use that space for something truly transformative. Vanessa felt that her mission went beyond merely leading a store. She wanted to build something that would be a symbol of change and equality, something that could inspire other companies and professionals to follow the same path. In the weeks that followed, Vanessa began implementing a new philosophy for the store. She gathered her team and, with a calmness that inspired confidence, announced the changes that would become part of the culture of that space. She explained, passionately and clearly, that the main focus of her business was not only to sell luxury products, but to create a meaningful experience for every customer. This is a space of respect and inclusion where everyone, regardless of background or appearance, should feel welcomed and valued. Vanessa's words echoed as a promise, a new vow that would establish a truly inclusive environment. Vanessa also decided that the transformation needed to go beyond the store and reach those who, like her, faced hardships building a career. She soon envisioned a mentorship program for young people from disadvantaged communities, offering them learning and development opportunities. She hired a diverse team of professionals with different backgrounds and experiences who brought a unique and welcoming perspective to customer service. This new team comprised people with stories of overcoming obstacles, dedication and talent, all chosen for their qualities and character, not for superficial factors. The store began to change. The environment, once rigid and elitist, transformed into a space where people felt embraced. Customers, upon entering, were greeted with genuine smiles and an attention that transcended mere commercial interest. The staff's attitude reflected Vanessa's mission, and each new day the business flourished, attracting a loyal clientele seeking not only products, but an experience of dignity and equality. With her team's help, Vanessa established partnerships with local organizations to offer training, workshops, and talks on inclusion and respect in the corporate world. These events brought people from all social spheres to the store, enriching the atmosphere and turning it into a gathering point for discussions on social change and advancement. The young participants in the mentorship programs received direct guidance from Vanessa and other professionals who shared their experiences and motivated them to pursue their dreams. Vanessa's legacy expanded. Each day, she saw the store becoming a true reflection of the values she had always cultivated, values that were so disrespected in that first encounter with Sarah. The employees, inspired by Vanessa's leadership and vision, began to see their roles not just as jobs, but as a mission. They knew they were building something bigger, something that would leave a positive mark on the world, and this gave new meaning to their routines and responsibilities. The store, which had once attracted only a specific elite audience, now became a symbol of inclusion and representation. Celebrities, business people, artists, and ordinary customers entered through its doors with the assurance that they would be treated with respect and kindness. Soon, Vanessa's story and her transformation of the store began to be shared in blogs, newspapers, and social media, inspiring other companies to adopt more inclusive practices. Vanessa Brooks silently became an example of leadership, a woman whose path was proof that success and empathy could coexist and transform the corporate world. In her moments of rest, Vanessa reflected on everything she had built. She felt deep pride seeing the positive impact of her work, the reflection of the respect and dignity she had always sought, and that she could now finally share with the world. What had once been only a dream turned into a struggle, became reality, and each customer, each young person, each employee who passed through the store was a living proof that her mission was coming true. The lights of New York City illuminated the large windows of Vanessa's apartment, where she sat alone on a quiet night, immersed in thoughts and memories that now seemed to belong to a distant life. Sitting in her favorite armchair, with a glass of wine in her hands, she looked down at the vibrant city, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The path had been long and, at times, painful, but as she recalled every step, every challenge, she felt a deep and deserved pride. She had faced obstacles many would have avoided, overcome difficulties, and achieved a victory that went far beyond professional success. It was a victory of character, dignity, and persistence. The store, now transformed into a symbol of equality and inclusion, thrived magnificently under her leadership. Every day, Vanessa received thank you letters, messages from young people who, inspired by her story, had found the courage to pursue their dreams, and stories from customers who valued the welcoming, respectful atmosphere she had created. Over time, the media began to tell her story as an example of resilience. The story of the woman who had once been humiliated trying to buy a luxury handbag and later became the owner of that very place was featured in magazines and newspapers, inspiring thousands of readers across the country. Vanessa Brooks became thus an icon of strength and resilience for the African American community and for all those facing the superficial judgments of the world. Her mentoring programs were in full swing, and Vanessa devoted much of her time to working directly with young people from underserved communities, providing them with the tools and motivation needed to build their own careers. The workshops, held periodically in the store, were open to the public and offered not only professional training, but also emotional support and inspiration. Vanessa shared her experiences with the participants, encouraging them to see challenges as steps toward success. And every time she saw the sparkle in those young people's eyes, she remembered the encouragement she had received from her own mother, the words of strength that had sustained her in her darkest moments. It was as if, through her journey, she was reliving the courage of that extraordinary woman who had never given up on her, who had always believed in her potential. The store was a success, not just for the products it sold, but for the transformative environment Vanessa had created. The space was now frequented by people from all backgrounds, and every customer was treated with genuine respect that transcended the luxury of the products. The team, made up of dedicated and committed employees, felt part of something greater. Each of them understood that they worked in a special place, a space where everyone was valued for who they were. They had come to admire and respect Vanessa, not just as a leader, but as someone who believed in a life mission, someone who showed daily that human values were above any stereotype or social label. One night, Vanessa was invited to receive an award at a ceremony organized by a foundation that celebrated business leaders and activists promoting inclusion and diversity. As she took the stage, before hundreds of people applauding her with admiration and affection, Vanessa felt overwhelmed by intense emotion. It was the first time she publicly shared the story behind her journey. With a firm yet moved voice, she spoke about the humiliation she had endured, the desire for justice that had guided her, and above all, the belief that no one should be underestimated. When she finished her speech, she received a standing ovation, and at that moment, she realized the impact of her story had become greater than she could have ever imagined. Returning home that night, Vanessa sat at her dining table with a gentle smile, contemplating the awards and newspaper clippings that told her story. But above all, what truly mattered to her was the inner peace she had finally found. She felt whole, knowing she had made a difference not only in her life, but in the lives of so many others who, like her, needed an example to keep moving forward. Success, achievements, recognition, all of these were secondary to the purpose she felt burning in her heart. In that quiet night, Vanessa reflected on the true meaning of her journey. She understood that the humiliation she had suffered wasn't just a painful situation, but a turning point that had driven her to build something bigger, something that not only corrected the injustice she had experienced, but also left a positive mark on the world. Vanessa learned that dignity is the greatest wealth a person can have, that true strength lies in staying true to oneself, even in the face of adversity. With her gaze fixed on the lights of New York, she felt a profound pride, a pride that didn't need applause or awards, for it came from a place of authenticity and determination. From her window, looking at the city lights, Vanessa made a silent promise to herself. She would continue her mission, expand her mentoring programs, her commitment to inclusion, and would keep using her position to open doors for those still facing the same challenges she once faced. For Vanessa, her journey was a legacy in the making, a symbol that respect and humanity should be the pillars of any true success. That night, as she closed her eyes, Vanessa felt at peace. She knew that somehow her mother, who had inspired her so much, would be proud of her, watching the unfolding of her story with the same love and hope they had always shared. Vanessa Brooks, the girl from humble beginnings who dared to dream big, had now become an example of resilience and empowerment for thousands. And, in the silence of that night, she finally felt she had achieved the most important victory of all, the inner peace of someone who lived true to their values, the peace of someone who built a legacy of dignity and respect that would inspire generations. A few days later, Vanessa was walking through the streets of New York toward the store. The city's lights seemed brighter than ever, as if reflecting the glow of her soul and the pride she felt recalling the path she had traveled. She wanted to see the space she had transformed, the place that, years before, had been the scene of a humiliation, but was now a symbol of inclusion and respect. As she approached the store, Vanessa noticed a young, solitary figure waiting, leaning against one of the benches facing the window. He was a young man, perhaps 20 years old, with an attentive gaze and a shy smile. When Vanessa drew nearer, he stood with a certain hesitation, standing with a respectful and admiring look, visibly moved to recognize her. "Miss Brooks?" he asked, his voice choked with a mix of nervousness and admiration. Vanessa smiled, nodding gently. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" The young man seemed to search for the right words, and finally, after a moment of silence, he took a deep breath and began. "I just wanted to say thank you." He lowered his head, as if trying to find the courage to continue. "Your story, knowing what you went through, seeing what you've achieved, it inspires me, gives me strength to believe that I too can go further." His eyes shone with sincere emotion, and he explained that he came from a modest neighborhood like hers, facing similar challenges. "I always thought my place in the world would be small, you know, but seeing you, I see that I can fight for something bigger." Vanessa felt her heart tighten and at the same time expand with that moment. It was as if she were looking at the reflection of her own youth, at the desire she had once had to overcome the barriers imposed by the world. With an encouraging smile, she held the young man's hands, imparting to him the same strength her mother had once given her, and replied, "You can indeed. Never doubt it. Believe in your strength, in your worth. What you dream, only you can achieve, no one else. Fight for it, and never let the world tell you who you are." The words left her mouth with the intensity of someone who had lived through them and knew exactly what they meant. The young man nodded, his eyes filled with tears, and after saying goodbye with an admiring look Vanessa would never forget, walked away, carrying a new hope, a flame of courage he would never lose. Entering the store and walking down the illuminated aisles, Vanessa recalled the challenges she had overcome and felt immense gratitude for her mother's memory, who had served as her guide and strength from the beginning. She stopped in front of one of the showcases and looked at her reflection in the glass. But what she saw was more than the image of a successful woman. It was the reflection of someone who carried a heritage of struggle, love, and unbreakable values. In silence, she closed her eyes and deeply thanked her mother's memory, letting the words flow from her heart. "Thank you, Mom, for never giving up on me, for teaching me to dream and fight for every one of those dreams. All of this is as much yours as it is mine. Wherever you are, I hope you're proud. I would never have gotten here without you." Opening her eyes, she felt enveloped by a gentle peace, as if her mother's presence were there beside her, proud and content, sharing that moment of fulfillment. Vanessa smiled, knowing that the journey she had begun so many years ago in a small, poor neighborhood now transcended her own life and story. It was a legacy of strength, respect, and inclusion that would endure, touching the hearts of many young people who, like her, once dreamed of something beyond what the world said was possible. And in that moment, Vanessa Brooks knew she had found the most precious victory of all, the certainty that her life had a purpose that would echo far beyond herself, transforming the world into a place where everyone could dream with dignity and fight for a future filled with hope.